For the genocidal acts committed against human colonies 6 centuries ago, this tribunal finds for the plaintiffs.
Holographic evidence flickered above the plaintiff's table, images of burning colonies slaughtered by 14 empires.
Damages are assessed at 2.1 quintillion credits.
The representatives of the 14 defendants exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing.
600 years. We finally have a verdict.
This tribunal rules that each of the 14 empires is jointly and severally liable for the full amount.
The courtroom erupted in low murmurs until a gavel struck the block. The strike released a pulse of light, a tradition signaling the finality of the judgment.
Now the real fight begins, getting them to pay.
The verdict was delivered. Now the galaxy would watch to see if 14 empires would honor it, or defy the law that had been laid down. Within hours, Chancellor Richard of the Vortic hegemony called a press conference.
This tribunal has no authority to bind my people. The alleged crimes are 6 centuries old. Any statute of limitations would have barred this long ago. We will not pay a single credit of this preposterous verdict.
One by one, other empire leaders echoed his defiance, their spokespersons issuing statements of refusal. The Vortic legal team had already filed objections the court had rejected. Richard ignored that entirely.
Let them try to collect. The Vortic hegemony bows to no human court. Not now, not ever.
In a secure Earth embassy suite, Ambassador Webb watched the broadcast in silence.
They're going to make this ugly. The court can rule, but it can't enforce, not on its own.
His aides murmured about options, but Webb already knew the next step. It would require a different kind of courage. The challenge was clear. 14 empires had chosen defiance over justice. Earth's legal victory now meant nothing without action. Within a day, Earth's leadership convened in the Enforcement Command Center.
The verdict is meaningless if we don't collect. The court gave us the right. Now we need the means.
Ambassador Webb laid out the judicial enforcement protocol. 14 frigates, each with a single marshal authorized to seize assets.
Marshal Patrick Dawson will handle the Vortic assignment. He knows their tactics, and he knows the law.
I understand the risks. I'll need full procedural authority and a frigate that can back it up.
The protocol was clear. The frigate was not a warship, but carried non-lethal enforcement measures to compel without starting a war.
The Vortic are the most stubborn. Richard will test us. You have the full authority of the tribunal behind you.
Then I'll make sure he understands what that means. 6 centuries of waiting. Now someone has to knock on the door.
The meeting ended with the decision to file the enforcement motion immediately. The tribunal would need to act. Ambassador Webb filed the enforcement motion at the tribunal registry, the document thick with evidence and legal precedent. Judge Thalia Vex reviewed it immediately, the attached refusal statements only sharpening her focus.
The defendants have chosen defiance. This court will now enforce its judgment.
The 7 magistrates convened an emergency session. The vote took less than 10 minutes.
Unanimous. 14 judicial enforcement frigates are authorized to proceed.
She pressed her seal onto the order, a holographic gavel imprint that carried the full force of galactic law. The order was broadcast to all 14 defendants, backed by a highlighted enforcement clause. A chronometer appeared in Earth's command center. 72 hours until voluntary compliance or martial intervention. The countdown had begun. Across 14 capitals, the defiant leaders now faced the same choice. Pay what was owed or discover what a Terran marshal could do with a signed order in hand. In a secure briefing room, Patrick Dawson opened the sealed packet. The orders were as clear as they were audacious.
Walk into Vortic, hand Richard a piece of paper, and take his money. Simple enough.
He boarded the TES Justicar an hour later, the frigate's bridge crew acknowledging him with crisp efficiency.
Captain, I want status updates on all other frigates as soon as we clear the system.
A holographic briefing linked all 14 marshals, their faces arranged around a tactical display.
Rules of engagement are clear, non-lethal enforcement only. We're not here to kill, just to collect.
We each carry the court's seal. That seal is our weapon.
The order came, simultaneous launch. The 14 frigates detached from their berths in perfect formation, then fanned out toward 14 different stars. In the Justicar's bridge, Patrick watched the other ships dwindle to points of light. The game had begun.
Richard thinks he can ignore a court order. Hess about to learn what happens when humans get legal.
As the frigates crossed the midpoints, compliance messages started flooding Earth's command center. The first 10 empires folded without resistance, their treasuries opening to the tribunal's accounts. Marshal Linda Reyes confirmed her target had capitulated, the payment already streaming through the escrow system.
That makes 12, Patrick. Only Vortic and the Zoltari are left. Richard just broadcast a direct threat to the Justicar.
I will say this once. No human marshal will set foot on Vortic soil. Any attempt will be considered an act of war.
The Zoltari issued a similar warning, their orbital defense platforms going to active alert.
2 holdouts. The Zoltari will crack when they see Vortic fall. It always comes down to Richard.
Richard's broadcast had been a deliberate provocation, designed to test whether the tribunal would back its own rulings.
This so-called court has no jurisdiction here. We will defend our sovereignty with force if necessary.
With 24 hours left, the Justicar accelerated to combat speed, its course locked on the Vortic capital. The 2 holdouts stood alone, their defiance now a direct challenge to the new enforcement model. The Justicar dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Vortic system, the capital world a crimson jewel beneath a web of orbital defenses.
Vortic Command, this is Marshal Patrick Dawson of the Tribunal Enforcement Corps. I'm transmitting the sealed enforcement order.
I warned you, Marshal. No human will set foot on Vortic soil. Turn back, or we will open fire.
Under Tribunal Enforcement Protocol, you are required to permit landing for service of process. You have 1 hour to comply.
The frigate held position, weapons cold, as the Vortic fleet trained targeting sensors on its hull.
Your tribunal has no power here, land, and you will be arrested. Fire, and you will be obliterated. This is your final warning.
I answer to the unanimous vote of the Galactic Tribunal. Deny me landing, and you deny the court. I am coming down.
A long, dangerous pause. Then a landing beacon activated on the capital's central spaceport. Patrick left the bridge and strode to the shuttle bay. The frigate would wait alone. The shuttle detached and began its descent, a tiny speck swallowed by the crimson atmosphere below. The Vortic guards marched Patrick through ornate gold-veined corridors to the throne room, where Chancellor Richard waited on his high seat. The chamber was lined with silent soldiers, their ceremonial armor hiding live weapons, a deliberate provocation.
Chancellor Richard, by order of the Galactic Tribunal, I present the sealed enforcement order.
Richard snatched the tablet from Patrick's hand, his eyes scanning the legal text with theatrical indifference.
This entire proceeding is a farce. Your tribunal has no authority here.
He laughed, a short bark, and tossed the tablet back onto the floor at Patrick's feet.
This is your final warning, Marshal. Leave now, or face the consequences.
Then I am authorized to proceed to your treasury and commence lawful asset seizure.
The guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but Richard waved them off with a dismissive flick of his fingers.
Let him try. Let the human discover what Vortic justice looks like.
Patrick walked through the opulent corridors of the Vortic Palace, a dozen guards flanking him, silent and watchful. The treasury vault doors loomed ahead, massive and circular, engraved with ancient symbols of power. The treasury master stood before them, uneasy.
I am Marshal Dawson. I am here to execute the tribunal's enforcement order. You will open this vault.
The treasury master nodded reluctantly and began the unlocking sequence, his hands trembling as he worked the console. Before the sequence completed, an aide rushed in, a data slate clutched in his hand. Richard was not finished. The aide thrust the slate at Patrick. Emergency counter motion, filed with the tribunal. All proceedings must halt.
A desperate move. Legally frivolous, but it could stall me for weeks.
You see, Marshal, you have no authority while the appeal is pending.
The Treasury Master stopped the sequence, the vault doors remaining sealed. The gathered officials exchanged nervous glances.
The appeal will be reviewed, but the enforcement order stands until the tribunal says otherwise.
Patrick opened his own tablet and began scrolling through the enforcement protocol, his jaw tight.
The countermotion was a stall. There had to be a provision against this.
He found a little-known clause. Obstruction of court process by frivolous legal action permits the marshal to overrule the appeal and call upon the enforcing vessel.
Clause 42. The marshal may override an appeal deemed frivolous and request direct frigate support.
He tapped the send key. The clause in his authorization transmitted to the Justicar. The Treasury guards abruptly formed a solid line before the vault, weapons half drawn.
You are now obstructing a tribunal enforcement action. Stand aside.
The guards did not move. Their captain's voice crackled over the comm, ordering them to hold.
They want a confrontation. They have no idea what they're inviting.
The standoff crystallized. Patrick was unarmed, but he had just called in the one weapon that mattered, and the Justicar was listening. From the throne room, Richard saw the guard's hesitation and slammed his console.
Arrest him. Now.
The guards surged forward, hands reaching for Patrick, then stopped as a low hum filled the air. From the Justicar, a crisp voice. Procedural Enforcement Protocol 7 engaged, non-lethal suppression active. A blue energy wave pulsed from the frigate, washing silently over the city and into the vault complex. Weapons deactivated. Comms went dead. The guards stood paralyzed, their gear useless.
As I said, the court's seal is our weapon.
He stepped past the frozen guards into the vault, raising his tablet. Holographic seizure tags began appearing on the nearest asset stacks. 80% of the treasury was about to be claimed.
Tagging in progress. The court will collect its due, one asset at a time.
From his throne room, Richard watched the seizure feed in disbelief. The guards had failed entirely.
All ships, intercept the human frigate. I want it destroyed.
Abruptly, the Vortic fleet broke orbit and began maneuvering toward the Justicar. The Justicar broadcast a warning. Interference with court process will be met with full procedural enforcement.
They are one small ship against an entire fleet. They're bluffing.
Dozens of Vortic warships ringed the Justicar, weapons hot, silhouettes dwarfing the small black frigate. The Justicar did not power weapons. It did not move. It simply waited.
Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them know I'm serious.
The flagship's forward cannon glowed, powering up. Space crackled with imminent violence. The Justicar remained silent, its hull reflecting the enemy lights, a single judicial representative facing an armada. Then the Justicar's hull began to glow, a soft blue light intensifying at its emitters. A ring of energy exploded outward, soundless, blinding, passing through the Vortic ships like a wave through smoke. One by one, the fleet's lights died. Engines quieted. Weapons powered down without firing a shot. Aboard the flagship, consoles flickered and died. The admiral stared at the darkening screens in disbelief. The Justicar approached the flagship, and a tractor beam gently pushed the massive vessel aside. A broadcast echoed on every channel. Interference with court process is inadvisable. In the throne room, Richard watched his fleet, the might of the Vortic hegemony, drifting powerless. His fists slammed the armrest, knuckles white, but no command could revive his dead ships. Meanwhile, in the treasury, Patrick continued tagging. The seizure now stood at 51%. The Justicar held position. The fleet was immobilized. And Richard had no answer. Richard stared at the dead tactical display, his advisor's whispers a distant hiss behind him.
Get me Dawson. I will speak to him directly.
A holographic image of Patrick flickered to life before the throne, the vault's tagged assets visible behind him.
You cannot do this. You are one human, an agent of a foreign court.
I already am. The seizure stands at 63%. Your legal options are exhausted.
In the vault, more blue tags pulsed onto asset stacks, the count climbing relentlessly.
You have one choice, Chancellor. Release the full payment voluntarily now, or I will take 80%.
Richard's fist trembled on the armrest, the weight of his collapsing authority pressing down.
This human, he has made me powerless in my own capital.
The hologram waited. Richard sat frozen. The next words he spoke would define the hegemony's future.
Release the funds.
The Treasury Master entered the command sequence, his hands no longer shaking. The vault systems hummed. A massive stream of light erupted from Vortic accounts, credits flowing like a river to the tribunal's escrow. Patrick's tablet flashed a confirmation, paid in full, 2.1 quintillion credits.
The court thanks you for your compliance, Chancellor. The tags are being released.
He swept his hand over the tablet, and the blue seizure tags winked out one by one. The Vortic officials in the vault stared, their empire's pride reduced to a completed transaction. Patrick sent a brief code to the Justicar. Mission complete. Payment received. Aboard the Justicar. The captain acknowledged. The frigate began powering down its enforcement systems. The Vortic hegemony was the 13th to pay. Only the Zultari remained. The Zultari leadership, observing the Vortic flagship's helpless drift on their tactical screens, lost all stomach for resistance. Within minutes, they transmitted an unconditional surrender.
Command, this is Reyes. The Zultari have paid in full. The 14th payment has cleared.
On their capital world, the last holdout leader pressed the compliance seal, a holographic imprint that ended 600 years of denial. The final stream of credits merged with the vast sum already collected, 2.1 quintillion credits, now fully in the tribunal's escrow. Across all 14 frigates, a single message flashed: compliance achieved. Enforcement concluded. In Earth's Enforcement Command Center, officers erupted in cheers, their screens flooding with green confirmations. News feeds around the globe announced the historic collection, a headline that had seemed impossible a month ago.
Patrick, it's done. Every last credit is home.
The debt that had once seemed impossible to collect was now a closed ledger. Case 884771, the ancient atrocities suit, was officially settled in full. Galactic news channels replayed the image of Vortic's darkened fleet endlessly, a lesson in the cost of defying the tribunal. One anchor reported, Chancellor Richard's military humiliated, his treasury emptied by a single human with a court order. Within the Vortic hegemony, Richard faced calls for resignation for the first time in his reign. He retreated from public view, his authority shattered by a legal proceeding he had mocked. On Earth, the 2.1 quintillion credit settlement triggered the largest investment boom in human history. New infrastructure projects broke ground across the planet, funded by a debt 6 centuries overdue. The tribunal issued a formal certificate of compliance, marking the ancient case as closed.
Today, we did not fire a shot in anger. We simply asked the galaxy to obey its own laws. Justice has been served, and it was served with a signature, not a war.
The enforcement was over, but the galaxy now watched humanity with new eyes, aware that Earth's patience had proven far more dangerous than its firepower. Within a month, the tribunal convened an emergency plenary session, the Grand Chamber filled with every member species.
The enforcement of Case 884771 has proven that the rule of law can be extended across the galaxy peacefully, but absolutely. I propose the immediate expansion of this tribunal's jurisdiction to all future violations of galactic law, enforced by a permanent martial corps.
The vote was swift, 43 in favor. 2 abstentions, none opposed. Thalia signed the expansion charter, and the holographic seal dissolved into a map of a much larger jurisdiction. A holographic map showed the tribunal's reach expanding outward, new systems joining under the protection of the law. By the same decree, The title Tribunal Enforcement Marshal became official, a badge of authority known across the stars. On Earth, the Marshal Academy welcomed its first full class, recruits training under the gaze of Patrick Dawson's portrait. Earth never sent an army again. From that day forward, it sent marshals. The 14 frigates were recalled for refit, their hulls now bearing the expanded seal, symbols of a new era. Months after the enforcement, Patrick Dawson stepped into the Marshal Academy, its halls bustling with recruits in fresh black uniforms.
They offered me a desk, a title, but the field is where the law is tested.
He entered the main auditorium, where the first full class of cadets stood at attention.
You are not soldiers, you are officers of the court. The law is your weapon, and its reach is yours to enforce. We don't start fights, we end them with a signature.
The cadets absorbed his words, knowing they would become the first generation of tribunal marshals. Among the instructors stood Marshal Linda Reyes, her experience from the Zultari enforcement now shaping the curriculum. Later, alone, Patrick looked at his own badge, the seal of the tribunal that had defied an empire.
It held. The law held. That's all that matters.
The Marshal Corps was no longer a mission. It was a legacy, and Patrick Dawson had ensured its foundation. Years later, a rogue empire attacked a newly contacted species, its fleet bombarding a defenseless world. The tribunal issued an emergency warrant. For a tense moment, the galaxy waited for Earth's response. A human armada? No. Something else. A single black frigate broke orbit, its hull bearing the expanded tribunal seal. No army followed. It arrived in system alone, broadcasting the warrant on all channels. The rogue empire's military hesitated. A marshal descended to the capital, walking unarmed into the palace. The memories of Vortic were still fresh. The marshal's words echoed. By order of the Galactic Tribunal, surrender your command or face immediate seizure. The rogue leaders, having seen the Vortic flagship drifting dark, surrendered without a single shot fired. The era of armadas was over. The law, backed by a single marshal, proved more powerful than any fleet. Earth never sent an army again, it sent marshals, and the galaxy learned to trust the seal of the tribunal. In the cosmic courtroom of the stars, justice now meant more than force. It meant inevitability. Decades later, the original 14 frigates were decommissioned and placed in a silent, eternal memorial orbit around Earth. They circled as unchanging monuments, their hulls still bearing the enforcement seals that had humbled empires. An elderly Patrick Dawson walked the memorial's central observation deck, the only human among the stars. He paused before a transparent panel etched with the names of the marshals who had flown that first mission. Linda Reyes, Joshua Park, Carolyn Vance, each name a story of courage under the law, each mission a chapter.
All those years, and the stars still shine bright. They remember.
He raised a trembling hand in salute, the motion as crisp as ever, toward the frigates and the nebula beyond. Above the memorial platform, the tribunal flag rippled, its gavel and scales catching the first light of dawn. Justice endures. That was the lesson, written in the silent fleet. In the cosmic courtroom, the law had become unbreakable. The cosmic courtroom nebula swirled, its ancient shapes forming the unmistakable silhouette of scales and gavels. It was the courtroom that had heard a 600-year-old cry for justice and had answered. In the end, humanity didn't win because we were the strongest. We won because we were the most patient, the most stubborn, and the most committed to the rule of law. And when the time came, we collected what was owed with interest. The lesson was never about force. It was about certainty. Certainty that the law would be enforced, that the seal would be honored, that a marshal would always knock. The galaxy now knew humans play the long game, and they keep their receipts. The nebula's gavel-like formations shone brighter, as if sealing the cosmic verdict. And then the stars slowly dimmed, and the cosmic courtroom fell silent. Justice, at last, at rest.